guys, what's up? Today I figured that it would be a good time to do an in-depth review on my Canon EOS M10. I've had it for about 3 months now, so I figured it's a good time to talk about what I do like about the camera, what I don't like about the camera, as well as some of the accessories, lenses that I've been using with the camera. So with that said, let's get into it. So one of the main things I really like about this camera is the form factor. This is a very small camera, as you can see. I can fit it in, I have a crossbody bag or my fanny pack. It easily fits in. And it's not super heavy, so it's really light and you don't really notice it when it's in your bag. And it takes great pictures, especially for the size. It's 18 megapixel APS-C sensor, so definitely not the best in terms of like today's standards for mirrorless cameras. But 18 megapixels is plenty of resolution, especially when you're comparing it to a smartphone camera that only usually has around 12 megapixels. So I've been really loving the images I've been able to get out of this camera. One thing that you'll notice is that I do have a third-party grip attached to the camera. That's because the only other spot really for any grip that's built into the camera is this little thumb pad right here. And it's fine without a grip, but I've really noticed that like ergonomically, it's been a much better experience having this little grip attached. So I have the Fotodiox grip on this camera. I think it was about 20 bucks on Amazon. It just screws into the little tripod mount down at the bottom. It includes another offset tripod mount, just in case you want to mount this on something. And it also still has access to the battery door right here, which I really love. So if you ever need to swap out batteries and you have this on, you don't have to worry about taking the entire grip off just to get a different battery in there. One other thing I really like about the camera, and this is kind of a pro and a con, is the simplicity of it. So you can see there's no dials or really anything. You have one little adjustment dial up here on the shutter, but on the back there is absolutely nothing. So a lot of this in terms of control is touch based. So you use the LCD screen on the back to adjust all of your settings. I don't mind that, honestly, especially because I do use this more in like a point and shoot type of manner. So having the touch controls isn't too much of an issue. I have noticed, especially because I live in a colder state, that in the winter time when I have gloves on, obviously that is an issue in its own, but I don't really like to be outside taking photos when it's cold anyway. I do wish there was maybe like one more dial somewhere on the camera, whether that be up on the top near like the power button or something on the back would have been nice. I do use this adjustment dial quite frequently though. One other thing I do really like about this camera that probably isn't a big deal to most as it is to me is the fact that the SD card and the micro HDMI port doors are plastic like the rest of the body, and that's really nice because it's able to be opened on a hinge and I don't really have to worry about tearing it off if it were one of those rubber weather sealed ones like I have on my Nikon Z30. I don't mind the rubber doors, but I do like having something that I know is securely latched. I also really like that it has a pop-up flash. It's not something I use often, but the fact that it's there is really nice. You're able to bounce it up off the ceiling if you want to, and it just tucks away really easily up on the top and barely even notice that it's there. Another thing I don't really like about the camera is the face tracking autofocus. This camera was released in 2015, so it doesn't have the dual pixel autofocus like you see in the Canon M50 or the M6 Mark II. And for that reason, I typically don't even use the face tracking. Not even that it's something I want to use and can't use. I don't really shoot like portraits or video with this camera, so I haven't really had a reason to need to use the face tracking. If I am using autofocus, I'm using the single point autofocus, especially if I'm going to be like indoors and doing plan shoots. Sometimes I'll just use the manual focus because there is focus peaking built into this camera. The manual focus on this camera obviously is going to be really reliable, especially if you know how to set it right, and with the focus peaking it's almost impossible to get it wrong. The single point autofocus I think works perfectly fine, especially if you're patient and able to take a little bit more time to get your shots set up the way that you want them to. That hasn't been a big issue, but that is still a con regardless. Another con, which to me I don't personally mind that much, but would have been nice, is that there's no electronic viewfinder. So everything that you're going to be doing when it comes to photo and video on this is going to be through the LCD on the back. It kind of is a preference-based thing. I think it would have been nice to have a hot shoe mount on the top where you could have an external EVF if you wanted. But again, this is an older model camera. There are newer model cameras that do have either a built-in or an optional EVF that you can add onto it. So I think if you want an EVF, I would stray away from this camera, but if it's not really something that you care about all too much, I think you could still get away with using this camera and still getting great images out of it. One other thing that's kind of a con is the ergonomics of it, again, which is something I've touched on before with me having this third-party grip on it. It's an easy fix, and so for that reason, I don't really think it's as much of a con as anything. There's not really too much that I have to say about this camera that's bad. Yeah, the fact that you do have to buy like a extra grip is a little annoying. Canon used to sell their own grip specifically for this model, but I don't think they're selling it anymore. The Fotodiox one is really nice, and it's an all metal construction too, so it feels really nice. And it still offers like plenty of grip. I'm able to hold it comfortably in one hand, and I don't really feel like it's gonna slip or fall. I do also have a wrist strap on just for that added comfort. I do also have my Peak Design anchors on here because I do have a neck strap that I use with this camera that I will sometimes interchange if I feel like it. But for this camera, I feel like having the wrist strap and having it be a handheld camera is really the way that I like to use it. Other than a third-party grip, another accessory, I guess you could call it, that I would suggest you get for this camera or any of the Canon mirrorless camera systems, the M series, is the EF to EFM lens adapter. So this will allow you to adapt any of the EF or EFS lenses on it. So for example, I have my 50mm 1.8, and I'll use that with the adapter, which with the crop factor on the APS-C sensor gives you about 75-80 millimeters for your focal length, and that is really nice for portraits if you want to cut in a little bit tighter doing street photography, anything like that. I think it's a really good option. And the 50mm 1.8 is probably one of the most affordable lenses that you could buy from Canon. I think I got mine again used for like 50 bucks. Overall, for a camera that was released in 2015, I still think it holds up pretty well, especially if you can get it for a good deal. For the body and the kit lens, I paid about 120 bucks for it used, and then I picked up the 22mm pancake lens that was, I think I bought it refurbished, so it was around $200. So all in, I really only have about $300 into this camera. So for a mirrorless camera that has an 18 megapixel sensor, I think that's a great deal. It's kind of hard to find something within that kind of price point. So that's it for my 3-month review of my Canon EOS M10. If you have any questions, comments, anything like that, please drop them down below. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I hope I see you guys again soon.